Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. It's great to see Casio being appreciated more and more these days on YouTube, God tier and all that. Even from people who are into the top end luxury stuff, Casio's contribution to the wonderful world of watches should not be underestimated. The F91W, for example, is the world's best-selling digital watch, shifting over 3 million units every single year, even now some 30 years after its release. But I'm not here to talk about the F91 or Casio's more affordable options today. I'm here to talk about the best of their best. After years of watching them from afar, I finally picked up my first Casio Oceanus in 2021, their JDM only line. This is very much Casio showing off, flexing their muscles, demonstrating to the world what they can do, but then not selling it to the world who get their more affordable digital resin offerings. The subject of today's video, their newly released T200 in green, I think is the best one that I've seen so far. It's a watch costing less than $500 that is finished better than watches that I've seen costing 4-5 times that much. But if you still haven't sampled an Oceanus, do yourself a favour, buy one, borrow one, get one in hand. You need to see how good these watches are in the flesh. Now you saw the pop-up. This video is sponsored by Buyee, the Japanese proxy buying service where I get all of my JDM watches. They gave me a voucher to help cover some of the costs of this one, and in return for their generosity, I'll leave a link to their website in the description of the video, and for the next 15 seconds, I will tell you about the pros and the cons of the service they offer. As mentioned, Buyee are a proxy buying service, meaning you can shop exactly as if you were in Japan. You've got access to Yahoo, Rakuten, that means new products and used at Japanese domestic prices. You find the item you like, you pay them, they buy it for you, it is shipped to them, they check it is what you ordered, and then they ship it on to you. The negatives of using a service like this are that there is a bit of a process involved, several steps to go through before your watch is with the courier, but the positives are the sharpest prices. Even taking into account shipping and taxes, I was able to find this Oceanus T200 about 15% cheaper through Buyee than anywhere else. And of course, just ridiculous levels of choice as discussed. I think that makes it worthwhile going through those few extra steps you have to when ordering. Okay, enough waffle, let's get out the macro lens and have a look at this beauty. Okay, while I'm getting into this admittedly empty box, I'd like to share a realization about myself that I came to recently. I'm mad. They say the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. This is now the second Casio Oceanus model that I have bought in inverted commas, green, despite the fact that the first one didn't actually turn up in green. Earlier on this year, I ordered a Casio Oceanus 4000 in green, according to the Casio press shots anyway, and it arrived looking like this, nothing like the colour in the Casio press shots. But despite that, I went ahead and ordered another Casio Oceanus in green, this time the 200, and it arrived looking thankfully a lot more like the colour in the press shots. It's actually slightly darker, but I don't have a problem with that. I think it's a really nice rich colour, this one. But Casio, you need to sort out your camera lens or your toner cartridge in your photocopier, because these two watches do not look 100% like these two watches, do they? Now there are obvious visual similarities between the 4000 and the 200, but I'm going to justify retaining both in my collection because there are differences as well. This one's made of stainless steel, so it's about 50% heavier than the 4000. It's also just a little bit smaller, so 41 millimeters in diameter, bang on 11 mil thick, 49 lug to lug, and a bit of downturn from those lugs as well. 20 millimeter lug width, tapering down to just under 18, back up to just under 19 at the clasp. Sized up for me, 7-inch wrist, 123 grams. So 41 stainless steel sports watch, but only 120 grams. And you may also have noticed that this watch is quartz. But you knew that already, didn't you? Because Casio don't make automatic movements. This watch features a Casio 5596 module, tough solar multi-band 6, all as advertised on the case back. The important one for me here though is Bluetooth, because we don't get the atomic clock signal down here in Australia. It has a low battery indicator, the second hand will jump every 2 seconds, and if the battery is dead, all 3 hands will stop at the 12. If the ambient light conditions are dark enough, after 10 PM the second hand will stop and the watch will enter level 1 power saving. If you leave it in a dark place for a week, your watch box for example, all 3 hands will stop and the watch will enter power saving level 2. Only the date will keep then ticking over at midnight. The watch will survive 6 months on level 1 and 20 months on level 2 after a full charge. Obviously the watch can be adjusted manually, and if you don't receive the atomic clock signal or connect it to a Bluetooth app, you can still set the month and the year so it will act as a perpetual calendar, and it will run within plus or minus 15 seconds per month, pretty much the standard accuracy for quartz watches. If you are able to receive the atomic clock signal or you do have it connected to your app, then the watch will constantly update itself to the correct time, meaning this really is a set and forget. The Bluetooth example connects to my phone 4 times a day to ensure that the watch is to the second accurate. And I really enjoy this component of Oceanus ownership, the fact that the watch is 100% accurate. Is that not rather the point of wearing a watch? Now my apologies, it's not going to be 10:05 on the 3rd of the month today like in every other video of an automatic watch that I make. Because this is quartz, because this is radio controlled or Bluetooth controlled, the time on the screen is the actual time that I filmed it. And yes, I did manage to film it just around 10 o'clock in the morning. So at least there are a couple of shots that will be in the traditional vein, shall we say. And I'll say it again, it is reassuring to know that the time on your wrist is the actual time. Okay, so smartwatch owners can say the same thing, and there's plenty of other radio controlled and Bluetooth linked watches available, and some that I have reviewed, but this one, this particular one, the T200 in green, is the best one that I've come across so far, I think. Now I'm not going to do a traditional moans and niggles section with this one. I guess I have 2 moans about this watch, and it makes sense to incorporate them as part of the review overall today. Clearly though, they haven't been deal breakers because I still highly rate this Oceanus, and I can see it becoming a key piece of my collection long term. To counter those 2 moans and niggles though, I think there are 2 areas where this watch is just outstanding. Let's not forget this is a $350 to $375 US watch. As I said, I'm now on to my 4th Oceanus, and I believe the 2 areas that I'm going to highlight are consistently outstanding across the Oceanus range. And those 2 areas are the crystal and the case finish. Let's have a look at the case finish first. Now as discussed, this watch is stainless steel. The 3 other Oceanus that I have had a look at have been in titanium. Doesn't seem to matter, the finish is amazing regardless of which material Casio are using. The brushed areas are super fine, the high polish is rich and lustrous, and the transitions between them are as clearly defined and sharp as I've seen on pretty much anything. I mean, the case finishing is just 10 out of 10 here. Again, it's a $375 watch. This is quite a purposeful looking case on the T200, same as the 4000 I showed you earlier on. Quite tooly, definitely more a sports watch than a dress watch. And it just looks so good when you move this one around, when you look at it from different angles. There are no dodgy areas, no weak spots, no sections that aren't finished as well as the rest of the case. The second area where I have been consistently impressed by Oceanus is with the crystals they use. The clarity on this piece of glass is absolutely fabulous. I'm sure you can see the greenish hue around the outer edge where the sapphire crystal embeds into the case. I'll be honest, I'm not sure if that colour is achieved by some form of coloured gasket or if the sapphire itself is mildly coloured, but it doesn't matter. It's a beautiful and dynamic effect either way. Now this T200 has flat sapphire, so you do get a bit of bounce back depending on the angle, but from some angles the glass just vanishes. I mean, look at it here. Or should that be, don't look at it here because you just can't see the crystal at all apart from that greenish hue around the outer edges of the dial. And that allows you to see those cantilevered indices, the shadows they create, and just how much depth they've managed to offer in that dial and handset considering the watch is only 11mm thick. I say it time and time again, the crystal used, the glass covering the dial can often make or break a watch. A good piece can make it, and this is a good piece of crystal. So if those are the 2 areas then where I think this watch stands out, where it excels, punches well above its price tag, what are the 2 areas that I think contain room for improvement, shall we say? Well, the first is the clasp. The bracelet itself is rather nice, 3 links, nicely brushed, well finished, well put together, pin and collar system holding it all in place, which is fine for the money, and it looks good on the watch, continuing that angular style. But the clasp. Oh dear. 2 holes of micro adjust only. They do provide a half link, which definitely helps, but 2 holes isn't really enough. And check that gap. It's really pretty bad. This clasp reminds me exactly of the clasp and the problems with the clasp on the Seiko Sarb 033. It is almost identical. On wrist it is not particularly noticeable, but definitely an area where Casio could take this watch to the next level with some pretty straightforward improvements. The second element that I'm not a big fan of is the handset. And again, this has been an issue with all of the Oceanus that I've looked at so far. I don't think they're big enough for a start, all 3 hands falling short of the respective markers. And if we go in close, the finish is okay, if not amazing, with a couple of rough edges noticeable. And I'm not a fan of that speckled effect. It's not dirt, it is intentional, the upper surfaces, I just don't think it looks great. Again, better hands would really take this watch up a notch. But again, I do have to keep reminding myself that this is a $375 watch. While we're looking at it under macro, let's have a look at the dial in more detail. The indices are really nice, being attached to the chapter ring rather than the dial, so they cantilever, they almost float over the center section, casting little shadows and really giving this watch a sense of depth far beyond its thickness. The indices themselves are multifaceted with high polished edges and multiple parallel lines running towards the pinion on their top surface. When we go really close, you can also see radial scoring that isn't actually visible to the naked eye. Well, not my naked eye anyway, and you can also see elements of the solar cell underneath it, those angled lines, again, not visible to the naked eye, thankfully. And those admittedly slightly small hands and multifaceted indices do have a decent amount of lume in them. Casio use Neo Bright, their own proprietary lume. Bit of a dark horse if that isn't too much of an oxymoron. Initially, it looks a bit meh, but it just keeps going. I've been wearing this watch a lot overnight with a small baby in the house, and let me assure you, the lume allows me to see the time anytime. And it fits my 7-inch wrist nicely. 49 lug to lug plus male end links mean that this one might not suit smaller wrists, but the lugs do point down as shown, which helps it fit me, and the wrist roll is very pleasant with those high polished edges to all 3 of the links in the bracelet. It is a bit showy, as all of the top end Casio stuff tends to be, but when it's this well finished, it's got the substance to back up the bling. It has 100 meters of water resistance despite the push-pull crown, rounding out its sporty, all-rounder grab-and-go credentials. And the shade of green on the dial, whilst perhaps not exactly as it looks in their press shop, is deep and rich, giving the watch another point of difference. I will definitely be keeping this one. I will definitely be keeping the 4000 as well because of its extra utility, but to be honest, I prefer the simplicity of the 3-handed T200. Or am I just making up excuses to keep just one more watch in my collection, and specifically just one more Casio in my collection? So there you have it, the Oceanus T200. If you're open to quartz and you're open to a premium watch from a brand normally associated with much cheaper offerings, then do yourself a favour, pick up one of these, a rock solid daily or grab and go that is far better finished than it has any right to be for the money. If you're into Oceanus, then why not check out my reviews of their 5000 and their 4000, both with the help of Buyee. Thanks for watching, I'll see you again in a future video.